Welcome, everyone. As we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Firstly, a very heartfelt welcome from myself. For any questions, please use the question and answer box for today's webinar. If you have any questions about volunteering, please feel free to reach out to us at info@volunteer.ca. So I know people are joining from the waiting room, and we are so excited to have you. We'll put some brief housekeeping notes into the chat box so that folks can see those. So stay tuned for those shortly. Before we get started, live captioning and translation is available to our audience. The link will be available in the chat. You will be able to receive messages, but it will not be open for submissions. We hope that this will help streamline the question and answer portion of this event. So please make sure to use the question and answer function to submit your questions for Volunteer Canada and our panelists. Bonjour et bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui pour célébrer le Semaine de l'Action bénévole. Je m'appelle Megan Conway et je suis la présidente et la chef de la direction de Bénévoles Canada. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Happy National Volunteer Week. My name is Megan Conway, and I have the privilege of serving as the President and CEO of Volunteer Canada. And it is wonderful to be here with all of you today as we come together to celebrate National Volunteer Week. A moment each year when we pause to recognize something simple and essential, that volunteers make Canada stronger. National Volunteer Week is about more than appreciation, though appreciation matters a whole lot. It's about recognizing the role volunteerism plays in shaping who we are as a country. Volunteers are how care shows up locally. They build trust, strengthen inclusion, and help communities respond, especially in moments of uncertainty and change. This national celebration exists to do two things. Firstly, to say a huge thank you to the millions of volunteers across Canada whose time, skills, and compassion quietly support our communities every single day. And second, it's a reminder to ourselves that volunteerism is not peripheral to Canada's future. It is essential social, civic, and economic infrastructure. Across the country, volunteers are mentoring young people, supporting newcomers, responding to crises, strengthening public services, and helping neighbors feel less alone. Much of this work happens without recognition, but its impact is felt everywhere. That's why today matters. Before we move into the program, I'd like to acknowledge someone who plays an important leadership role with Volunteer Canada and will be joining me today during today's celebration. I'm joined by Gina Jordan, Chair of our Board of Directors, who will be helping to acknowledge and celebrate our guests throughout the event. Gina brings a deep commitment through her thoughtful leadership and her strong belief in the power of volunteerism, and I'm grateful that she is here to co-host this celebration with me. Hi, Gina. Gina leads the sustainability and ESG policy at Enbridge, and beyond her professional role, Gina is deeply committed to volunteering and community building, something she lives personally and not just professionally. She's been a member of the Volunteer Canada Board for 4 years and serves as its chair currently. She's based in Calgary, and she's a passionate community volunteer who truly believes in the power of people coming together to create positive change. Thanks for being here, Gina. And to everyone joining us today, volunteers, partners, leaders, and friends, thank you for being part of this national celebration. We are honored to mark this moment with you. Before I officially begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe peoples, whose care for this land continues today. As we gather to celebrate volunteerism, I also want to recognize the many ways that Indigenous communities have long upheld practices of mutual care and service. I offer this acknowledgement with respect to Indigenous peoples joining us from across the country. All right. Let me share a little bit of background briefly about why National Volunteer Week matters so much and what our hopes are for today's conversation. National Volunteer Week matters every year, but this year, it matters a little more than most. Across Canada, communities are asking big questions. How do we stay connected? How do we care for one another? And how do we make sure people don't just survive, but actually feel a sense of belonging? Volunteering is one of the quiet, powerful ways that Canadians have always answered those questions, by showing up and stepping in and building something together. That's why the theme for National Volunteer Week 2026 is so exciting. Ignite volunteerism. This theme isn't just about celebrating what volunteers already do, it's about sparking participation, fueling connection, and renewing our culture of involvement. And this year is especially significant as it's 2026 and the International Year of the Volunteer, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to recommit to civic participation and to recognize volunteering as essential infrastructure for resilient communities and a healthy democracy. National Volunteer Week is our moment to say volunteering doesn't just happen, it's ignited. And when it is, communities are stronger, people are connected, and the future looks a little brighter. Our hope today is to help ignite that in everyone, both here on our webinar and across the country, by bringing together leaders and by hearing perspectives from past Canada Volunteer Award winners. We want to ignite volunteerism together. Now, I'm especially excited about today's welcoming guest. One of the things I love most about National Volunteer Week is that it reminds us where leadership in this country really lives. It lives in communities and it lives in relationships. And very often, it lives with people who step forward, not because they have to, but because they care. It's the volunteer who checks in on the neighbor during a snowstorm and the person who shows up week after week to make sure someone else doesn't feel alone. Small acts, but with a big collective impact. That's why it feels especially meaningful to me to welcome a minister today whose own story is deeply rooted in community and service. Coming from Thunder Bay, Ontario, in Northern Ontario, and before entering federal politics, the Honourable Patty Hajdu worked on the front lines of public health and social services, supporting people navigating homelessness, addiction, and poverty, and working alongside community organizations and their volunteers. She knows what it means to respond when the stakes are high and resources are limited. And her experience shows. Throughout her time in public office and across multiple portfolios and moments of real national challenge, Minister Hajdu has consistently brought a real perspective grounded in people, dignity, and the belief that strong communities don't happen by accident. At Volunteer Canada, we believe every day that volunteerism isn't nice to have, it is essential, social, civic, and economic infrastructure. And we're grateful to work with leaders like Minister Hajdu who recognize that governments don't do this alone. That's why I'm so very pleased to be able to introduce the Minister of Jobs and Families and the Minister responsible for Federal Economic Development Agency for Northern Ontario. I'm proud of the long-standing partnership that Volunteer Canada has had with the Ministry and with the Minister, and we're working together to advance important work like the National Volunteer Action Strategy. I'm especially grateful that the Minister is here with us today to celebrate National Volunteer Week with us. So please join me in welcoming the Honourable Patty Hajdu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you, Gina, as well, for your leadership. And of course, bonjour tout le monde et bonne semaine de l'action bénévole. As you've said, Megan, I'm Patty Hajdu. I'm currently serving as Canada's Minister of Jobs and Families and Minister responsible for FedNor, which is an economic development agency in Northern Ontario. And I'm thrilled that I'm able to be here today with my dear friend and Senator Farah Mohamed, and of course, all of you to celebrate. You mentioned the lifelong journey I've had in service to community. And in fact, just before I was elected, nearly 10 and a half years ago now, I worked for a large homeless shelter in Northwestern Ontario. In fact, the largest homeless shelter in Northwestern Ontario. We served 66 individuals every night with a place to sleep, but we also had a large kitchen where we served about 200 meals twice a day to people experiencing hunger and people who couldn't actually prepare food in their own living circumstances. And of course, in order to be able to do all of that work and serve some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, we had a very robust slate of volunteers. And I have to tell you, it was obviously something I celebrated with the volunteers that served our organization, but also something that I carried with me into my work as a politician, that communities really are built from the people who love them, from the people who step out of their own comfort zone, who step out of their own day-to-day life and responsibilities to give a little extra to those around them. And so often, these are the stories of volunteers in every community. In our case at Shelter House, it was often groups of volunteers who signed up to prepare a meal, who signed up to help organize food donations, who signed up to drive vans around the community to collect food that otherwise would be discarded or demolished, that could go towards the service of people in our community who were really struggling and having a very hard time. And so all across this country, organizations play such an important leadership role in communities. And you mentioned this, Megan, in your own opening comments, that in fact, volunteers are the backbone of communities. And it's a role that I think we just don't celebrate enough, even though I know there are recognition ceremonies in municipalities and at the provincial level and at the federal level. And that's why the work that the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada does to support volunteerism is so important. Things like National Volunteer Week, the Ignite Volunteerism campaign, and of course, the development of a national volunteer action strategy. Volunteer Canada brings together these diverse perspectives all across the country, but also advances the important conversations on the future of volunteering. I especially liked your comments, Megan, about the importance of volunteerism to grow connection and to grow community and to develop belonging. And that's directly in line with the Government of Canada's programs and priorities. In fact, I often speak to young people who are really struggling. They're worried about the state of the world. They're worried about what they're seeing online. They're worried about what their futures hold for them. They're worried about the environment. And some of the most powerful responses I've seen are when young people have an opportunity to volunteer in a space with a program, with kind program developers in a way that utilizes not only that fear that people have, but really transforms that fear into purpose and transforms that fear into hope and for the ability to develop new skills and new relationships right alongside that practice of service. Volunteerism has so many positive impacts on communities, and the government supports volunteerism in a wide range of federal initiatives, such as the New Horizons for Seniors program that allows for many folks to come together in community to break down the barriers to socialization, to ensure that seniors have a place to gather, a place to feel connected to community, a place to give back in many ways to their community, the Social Development Partnerships program, and of course, the Canada Volunteer Awards. So on that note, I would like to take a moment to recognize two inspiring individuals joining us today, Udlu Hanson and Priscilla Ojomu, recipients of Canada's Volunteer Awards. Priscilla Ojomu is a staunch advocate for justice in her local communities. She co-creates and leads initiatives that promote equity and drive sustainable change. For example, she co-founded the Canada Confesses in response to racialized violence. This is a youth-led grassroots organization that creates safe spaces where people can share their stories and access information, services, and volunteer opportunities. It's partnered with over 30 organizations, and it's reached more than 16,000 people. She's also developed a guidebook to address environmental pollution for the Intercouncil Network's 2023 Youth Champions program. And in 2023, Priscilla was a youth delegate at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, representing marginalized Canadian youth on a global scale. Udlu Hanson is a dedicated community leader and committed to uplifting the community in meaningful ways that reflect Inuit values. She co-founded the Anauma Community Foundation to meet the needs of Nunavummiut, and she embodies the spirit of Ayikatinik, the Inuit tradition of working through consensus. She involves and consults others and fosters a collaborative environment. Udlu's activities have brought significant benefits to people living in Iqaluit and across Nunavut. Under Udlu's leadership, Anauma Community Foundation has raised $7.9 million for Iqaluit and Nunavut in just over 2 years. But her contributions go beyond dollars, and they've had a profound impact on our community. Through her efforts, families in need have secured housing. They've eased one of the most pressing needs in Nunavut.
Might have had a freeze.
We may have had a technical glitch with Minister Hajdu.
This is that moment of pause, as we pause to thank those volunteers around us. Again, I was also enjoying Minister Hajdu's comments, and so thankful for her sharing her stories this morning with us. And I'm really struck by, thinking about making 200 meals twice a day as those groups of volunteers coming together. And it's really those kinds of actions that, often I've served in those kind of organizations where it's a lot of fun for those of us who are volunteering, but it's really critical in terms of that purpose and that service that's taking place to help those around us. But again, really appreciated hearing those stories. And as we think about those communities being built, as she said, by the people who give a little bit extra, many of you giving a little extra on the call today, and thinking about how we transform that fear into purpose and into skills, and those skills into action, and how we ignite that action to be able to break down barriers and connect people in communities across Canada. And that's truly the volunteering in action that we're here to celebrate today. So I think we'll turn it over back to you, Megan.
But thank you so much, Gina, and a huge thank you to Minister Hajdu for joining us today. It truly means a lot to us at Volunteer Canada to have her presence here, especially as she's the minister who is leading Employment and Social Development Canada and the Minister of Jobs and Families. Her portfolio is a significant one as it strengthens volunteering infrastructure across the country through the programs she was identifying, like the New Horizons for Seniors program, and especially through the Canada Volunteer Awards and through our partnership around a National Volunteer Action Strategy. So her personal insights and her leadership position, I think, are especially important in this International Year of the Volunteer. So it is now, it's my real distinct pleasure to be able to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Senator Farah Mohamed. Farah is a leader who has spent her entire career asking one essential question. What does it look like to truly invest in young people? And what happens when we do? From her own experience arriving in Canada as a refugee, Farah has been deeply attuned to the role that opportunity, participation, and belonging play in shaping a young person's future. Across every chapter of her leadership, from founding initiatives to amplify young women's voices, to serving as the CEO of the Malala Fund, to leading the King's Trust Canada, Senator Mohamed has focused on ensuring young people are not just supported, but trusted with real responsibility, influence, and pathways into the society and the economy. She understands that volunteering is one of the earliest and most powerful entry points for youth, where confidence is built, leadership is discovered, networks are formed, and civic identity takes shape. In that sense, volunteering is not a side story in youth development, it's foundational. And now as a senator, Farah continues to champion the idea that Canada's future depends on whether young people can participate meaningfully and whether our institutions are ready to make room for them. We could not ask for a more fitting keynote for National Volunteer Week. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Senator Farah Mohamed.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that. And listen, I'm happy to be put on hold if the minister is able to jump back on. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. It's a privilege to be with you today virtually during this International Year of Volunteers. This is my favorite type of room because it's full of people who shape how communities actually function. And I get a real buzz out of that. Volunteer centers, community organizations, corporate partners, volunteer managers, funders, public servants, and volunteers themselves. You each sit at a different point of the system, but you're working toward the same outcome: stronger, more connected communities. Before I go further, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge Megan and the team. What you've built here is not just an event. It's a convening of a system that does not always get the space that it deserves. You've brought together the people who carry this work in diverse ways and create a movement. That matters more than it might seem. So thank you for your leadership, Megan, for creating the conditions for this conversation. The minister stole a little bit of my thunder because she was talking about our two recipients. So I joined the minister in congratulating Udlu and Priscilla. I'm wowed by your trajectory thus far. I do wish we were all in the same space because this is not a room of observers. This is a room of operators. And as I said, that creates its own buzz. You're people who design programs, mobilize others, you mitigate risks, you measure outcomes, you raise resources, and you show up when it matters. And I hope you see what I see: a network that keeps communities functioning in ways that are often invisible until they are missing. In other words, we all know that volunteerism is not separate from how Canada works. It is part of how Canada works. It is what keeps services moving when demand rises, and what keeps people connected when formal systems are not enough. Megan asked that I speak about my own path. As she mentioned, before I entered what we call the Red Chamber, my work was almost entirely in communities, and I count my time on Parliament Hill some I guess it's now 30 years, 20 years, where the policy for me really met the lived reality. So through my work with Malala Fund or the King's Trust, Girls 20, which is now called Fora, I saw something that holds true across all the different spaces, that the most important outcomes do not come from one actor alone, that they come from alignment, from people and organizations seeing the same gap and deciding not to wait for someone else to fill it. That instinct exists in this room. Even though we're virtual, this is where we live when we are in this room. But what is different here is that you're stepping up individually. You're building systems that make it possible for others to step in, and that's the real multiplier. Volunteerism matters. The question is how we sustain it, how do we scale it, and adapt it in a context that's changing very quickly. So we're living in a paradox. We're more digitally connected than ever, but not necessarily socially connected. Health Canada has identified social isolation as a serious public health concern with measurable impacts on both mental and physical health. In Canada, data continues to show rising loneliness, particularly among young people, even as digital engagement increases. At the same time, many of your organizations are seeing a rising in demand for services paired with the challenges in volunteer recruitment, retention, and long-term engagement. So the pressure is not theoretical, it's operational. More need, more complexity, and a volunteer model that is being asked to do more with less on a consistent basis. So in some ways, technology has helped in many ways. It allows for faster coordination, broader outreach, and more flexible engagements. But it's also changed expectations. People engage differently, they commit differently, in many cases less consistently, which means that the work that you do, creating structured, meaningful, sustained opportunities for people to show up, has become more important now than ever. Because volunteerism is one of the very few remaining spaces where relationships are built through actions, not transactions. When Megan asked that I would speak with you today, I jumped at the chance because for me, volunteering has shaped my path, and I believe that it's made me a better person, a leader, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and now a senator. Megan suggested that I share my path and what volunteerism has meant to me personally. As a member of the Ismaili community, and this is a sect of being Muslim, it's a very liberal sect of being Muslim, volunteering is not an external concept for my community. It's a foundational one and one that really speaks to how we show up. Service is embedded and is a shared responsibility, and the expectation isn't whether you'll contribute, it's how you will contribute. That perspective has really shaped how I see the broader ecosystem. My own path in volunteerism started in my own community. You know, everything from serving tea to the elderly in what we call our Jamaat Khanas, our mosques. It went there to my parents suggested that I volunteer in a nursing home. And I think in hindsight, the reason they did that was because we didn't have a relationship with our grandparents. Then on to my high school, and each experience built on the last one. Eventually it was university and various causes. And that for me was how my habit of volunteerism took shape. It started early. It started in environments where I could learn that showing up matters and that consistency matters. At one point, when I didn't have a job, I volunteered on a political campaign. It was a way to stay engaged, to contribute, and to keep learning, and a way, in all honesty, to get out of my parents' house. Speaking of which, I did learn a lot of these habits from my parents. They were and they continue to be lifelong volunteers in a consistent values-driven way. Supporting Heart and Stroke, Crohn's, contributing to the art community, helping seniors with their taxes. My father's probably doing that right now as I speak. Organizing food and clothing drives for newcomers. My sister also routinely, sorry for that, is involved in volunteerism. She drives around and hands out care packages to the unhoused, and now dedicates all of her time to building the skills and finding jobs for young women in Uganda, the country that I was born in. So I'm deeply grateful to my parents for instilling those habits in us, because volunteerism is not a single act. It's become a pattern. It's become my way of showing up. And it's what's given my life meaning in a way that cannot be quantified. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how volunteerism and youth come together. The minister was talking about this, and I, like you, was very interested in what she was going to say and connect the dots. She's one of those people that I've always looked up to and think that has made a valuable contribution to her time in political Hill on Parliament Hill because of all the work that she's done in the volunteer sector. For me, in whatever capacity you volunteer, intentionally or not, you're shaping people. Volunteer environments are one of the most important development spaces we have for young people in this country. And the minister was saying a little bit about how young people are feeling. For me, this is not a great time for young people, and the volunteer sector can actually help shore up the core where we're not seeing some of the action that young people might have seen in past years. For me, it's a space where a young person can take responsibility. They can work along different spectrums. They can solve problems, and they can lead without formality. Importantly, it's a place where young people become trusted before they are fully credentialized. And that actually really does matter, because we often ask, how do we prepare young people for the future work? Well, I want to focus on 4 things. First, in the volunteer sector, I think it's really important that volunteers, along with the places that they're working, are benefiting. For young people, it means skills building, and that's in a place that doesn't feel like school. So volunteering for me is where communication, teamwork, leadership, and problem solving get stress tested in real time. Not writing an essay about collaborating, you're actually doing it. Second, volunteering is often a place for career discovery through proximity, not theory. Many young volunteers get exposed to fields they'd never otherwise consider. Community health, politics in my case, event management, social services, environmental work. It can be a bit of a trial run to see if there's an area you like. Third, we all talk about the importance of networks. Well, through volunteering, mentors, references, and opportunities emerge organically, not in a transactional way. And I think this is increasingly more important because people remember who showed up. Fourth, and this is something that I think if I lose sleep over anything, it is, how are we engaging in a civic kind of way? So volunteerism often improves civic literacy and belonging by understanding how communities actually function. Nonprofits, municipal systems, grassroots organizing, cultural institutions. Canada's civic ecosystem becomes less abstract and more lived in. And that, I think, really does connect the dots for many young people who don't know, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? And with whom am I going to do it? And finally, and this I don't think can be overstated, volunteerism is a place where confidence is earned. It's not declared. There's a particular type of confidence that comes from being useful in real situations. It's not performative. It's not polished. It's really grounded in lived experience. The bottom line for me is, when I look at the theme of this year, igniting, when I look at what Volunteer Canada does, and when I look at the opportunity and in some ways the challenge we have before us, for me, the bottom line is that volunteering is a time when young people can feel overwhelmed by what's lying ahead, unemployment, all those things. But the voluntary sector can be a place where identity, skills, and civic imagination start to converge. And you can see this play out across the country. In Ontario, newcomer serving organizations rely on structured volunteer programs to help families navigate systems. And when newcomers are young, having a young person to help them can make a huge difference. I see this in my own community where we have a mentorship program. If there's a young person who comes from a different country, we match them with a young person here. So it's peer-to-peer learning. In British Columbia, it's wildfire season. You can see how many volunteers go out, not just because it's in their own backyard, because they know they can make a difference. And with a generation that's concerned about climate change, this becomes even more important. And in Atlantic Canada, after storms like Fiona, coordinated volunteer efforts enabled communities to recover quickly. I know several young people who showed up and stood shoulder to shoulder to do whatever needed to be done. Different contexts, same reality. So I want to switch now to how volunteerism at scale does not happen by accident. It's built, it's managed, it's funded, it's supported. That's the ideal scenario. And when youth are involved in these various ways to communities benefit and young person benefits, when I think about where we are in Canada and around the world, I think it's impossible not to think about the economic benefits of volunteering or volunteerism to a country like ours. Many of you know the facts. I'll repeat them just so we can really center ourselves on the incredible impact of this sector. tens of billions of dollars annually in value to Canada. Canadians contribute, I understand, over 4 billion hours of work each year. And if you were to compare that as a standalone sector, it would sit alongside Canada's major industries. So if this isn't Canada strong, and I'm not trying to be political, but if this isn't Canada strong, I don't actually know what is. So let me speak directly to you for just a moment. To volunteer centers, I see you as the connectors. To community organizations, you turn intention into impact. To corporate partners, you can move from being episodic to sustained engagement. And you can use that as a lever for recruitment, for retention. There are so many different ways that corporate partners can come to the table. And I hope that we'll become more innovative about how we do that. To volunteer managers, you're the operational backbone. And to funders, you enable scale and sustainability. And I hope that funders will start to look at risk and be willing to take a bit more risk in what is a very risky world we live in. We have to start doing things differently. To all of you, thank you for what you do. This is where the vision of Canada Strong becomes real, not just economically strong, but socially strong. It's a country where systems align, communities respond, and people trust one another. That kind of strength is built through coordination, through consistency, through people choosing to show up. So the question is not whether volunteerism matters. Come back to this. The question is how we strengthen the system around it. Because the risk ahead is not lack of need. It's fragmentation and it's burnout. Volunteering is often treated as a secondary rather than essential. When that happens, even the most committed people and organizations end up carrying a weight that no system should place on individuals alone. I say that because I really do think, and I was going to say this to you, Megan, when I accepted the challenge of speaking to this group, that things aren't perfect, but we have such an incredible secret weapon, an asset that really does tackle a lot of the different things that we are facing individually, in our community, and in our country, and then globally. So I thought I would just offer a few comments in terms of volunteerism in the global context and why it's increasingly important during these times. Although we may not always see it, how Canadians show up on the international stage is an important element of our foreign policy. I'm not sure how many people saw this in the news today, but Minister Anand will be convening some of the major players in terms of our diplomatic network to come together and put a streamlined, focused foreign policy before her colleagues. When I think about how volunteerism and Canadians show up on the stage, I see that as an opportunity, and I hope, Megan, through you and your colleagues in the cohort, will really look at this as an opportunity to showcase how volunteerism leads into this. So, for example, through the Volunteer Cooperation Program, Canadian volunteers work alongside rural, local partners around the world, supporting community-led priorities like education, gender equality, climate resilience, and economic development. It's not about exporting solutions. It's about building capacity with communities and not for them. And this is something Canadians do really well. We do it well here, at home, in rural, remote, and urban areas. We can do it really well. We can continue to do it really well outside of our own borders. And it's one of the most effective expressions of soft power because it's grounded in people-to-people partnerships and relationships. And it reflects something that I think we don't always put on the front page. And I think it's something that we could do. And I know from the work that I did with the Malala Fund and the King's Trust that people look to Canadians for solutions. So with that, I hope I've given you a sense of why this sector matters to me, what I think the future of the sector is, how important and vital volunteering is to the fabric of Canada. And I want to leave you with one rallying point. We may not be able to control the direction of the world, but we can control how we show up within it. We can control whether we build systems that make participation easier or harder. We can control whether we support people already doing the work or leave them to carry it alone. Because in the end, the strength of this country will not be measured by what we build. It will be measured by how we stand up for one another, consistently, quietly, and together. That's the work that you're doing, and I hope that you will continue to do it. Thank you for inviting me to join you today, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Senator Mohamed. I cannot tell you how you have just hit on all of the important points and all of the important notes in terms of thinking about how we scale the volunteer power that exists in this country. And so I know that you have a couple of minutes for some questions from the audience, and I've had some here sent through. But the first question is about when you think about this being the International Year of the Volunteer, what do you think makes Canada stand out in the context of volunteering worldwide, and especially this year in particular? And as you're answering that, I'll just direct folks in the audience to put the questions in the Q&A box. So we'll look forward to a couple of those as the senator's thinking about what makes Canada stand out in the context of volunteering worldwide in the International Year of the Volunteer.
Yeah. So, Megan, it's a fantastic question because I think if you had asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have had a very different answer. Or maybe I'll say pre-Trump, right? I think now we're in a place where we have proof of concept. We are known for our social fabric, for investing in community, for working together, for being, and maybe it's not the right word, but an army of people who care. And we show up and we do that. So I think we're honest brokers, and this is something that we can export. So people are looking to us now more than they've ever looked to us, particularly in this region, and said, how can we work with Canada? How can we learn from Canada? How do we get Canada at the table, at more tables? So I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is when I look at us in terms of a global environment, we have proof of concept. There's nothing stronger than proof of concept. I don't know how else to say it, except you can look at almost every sector and say, how do you stand up that sector? And aside from things like manufacturing or what we see as the big sectors, the fact that our sector, the volunteer sector, the charitable sector, fill the holes that exist because of not enough innovation or not enough funding or not enough risk or not enough chutzpah, whatever the case may be, I think people go, how is it that Canada has been able to withstand some of the challenges, some of the rocky moments? And I think largely, even though the sector doesn't get credit for it, I think it's because we have this very strong volunteer charitable sector that underpins a lot of the stuff that falls away. So when I look at issues like gender, we are honest brokers. People want to know what we're doing. When we look at things like climate, maybe we haven't figured it all out, but we're honest about what we do and how we do it. When we look at things like supporting our elders, newcomers, I mean, I could go on and on and on. So I think that we have proof of concept in a way that many other countries do not.
I love that. I love that answer. And I appreciate your honesty in delivering it as well, because I feel like it's coming from the real deal. Okay, there's two more questions I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to formally thank you for your amazing remarks that were totally spot on. Okay, so one of the questions from the audience is, based on your expertise and your leadership role, could you speak a little bit to the myriad reasons why volunteerism is declining in Canada? And so if you think about things like delayed retirement and students prioritizing paid employment, those are some examples, but do you have other perspectives about what's happening that's causing this decline in volunteerism in the country?
Yeah, I think those are two of the major ones. But I think the other thing is, I think people are tired. People are exhausted. People aren't seeing impact. I think this is a problem. I really do. I'm not even joking about it. I think people, as I said in my speech, I think we're most connected, but we're further apart. I'll just take myself for example. Okay, I'm 55. I have an 18-year-old niece, and I have parents who are in their 80s. My parents continue to volunteer because it gives them community. It gives them belonging, and they don't use this. They do, but they don't use it as a way to stay connected and alive and, keep their spirits up. My 18-year-old niece volunteered right through high school. Now she's in college, and now there are distractions. They're worried about their future. They're worried about everything meaning something to get a job. And I think we're forcing them to connect dots because the opportunities aren't there. I think, as I said, one of the ways that young people can plug in is to do volunteering. But I don't know that we necessarily explain the benefits of volunteering the way that we used to, because there's a lot of noise out there, right? I remember when I was in school, we'd have groups come in and tell us about all these different volunteer opportunities, and you'd be chomping at the bit, right? They were cool, they were fun, I don't know that we do that in schools anymore. Maybe we do. Do I think that our civic learning is strong enough that we say, hey, a big part of being a member of a community is to volunteer? I don't know that we do that, but when I grew up, it was just second nature. So I think there there's the world of gloom and doom and people don't know what to do. I think there's the, are we presenting the opportunities collectively in schools, in communities, at sports, whatever the case may be, to say, hey, let me connect the dots on why volunteering matters. I'm a test case. I went to volunteer in a political campaign. I'm sitting in the Senate. There's not a direct line, but certainly it's part of the path. And then the final part, I think this is very, I think that it's not always accessible. It's not necessarily affordable to volunteer. Only certain types of people can volunteer. If you have two jobs trying to pay the bills, you don't have time to volunteer. So I think there's a whole conversation around what kind of society do we live in? Do we live in a society where you can have time and you can afford to volunteer? You know, when you go volunteer downtown Toronto, you got to park your car if you're driving. Why aren't we doing things or more things that allow people to have a tax incentive to volunteer? And people say, well, Farah, that goes against the principle of volunteering. No, it doesn't. You give your time and your talent. It doesn't mean you have to incur $25 every time you volunteer. Maybe there's something we could do to incentivize and to credentialize the idea of volunteering. We have to think differently, because if we continue to think about the sector the way we've always thought about it, we're going to get the same results. And there's nothing wrong with the results, but we live in a different world, which means in the same way we look at every single sector, Megan, we're looking at it with bright eyes, innovation. You guys can't do that alone. Government, for-profit, charitable sector, we all have to do it, right? And so we have to think about how can how can businesses incentivize their employees? How can we make that? So for me, it's like, this is the moment where you get to reimagine, how do we support a volunteer sector? If we really want one, and we do, if we really need one, and we do, then what do we do that's different? I'm sorry that I was a little bit windy in my answer, but it's not up to the individual alone. The system has to work.
No.
The ecosystem has to be there.
The ecosystem has to support it for sure. And you're totally on point around some of the identified blocks in that system and the ecosystem and the ways, especially through the National Volunteer Action Strategy work that we're leading in consultation and collaboration with a whole number of partners. It's identifying some of those recommendations. So as we wrap up, I would just love to hear, because you're speaking to so many leaders in this network that are so committed and passionate about volunteerism and really strengthening that civic backbone in our country. What advice would you give this network around how to move from being invisible to visible, and how do you think about supporting these innovations at scale? Because I think we're in complex times, and this invisibility piece is real for many folks. And I think National Volunteer Week is a moment to celebrate that, but I would love to hear what else we could be doing as leaders to really elevate the importance of this sector and its future as being essential to the future of Canada, really.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get a lot of fans when I say this, but stop being so shy. Stop being so modest. You know, $4 billion or 4 billion hours or whatever the case may be, like, numbers matter. Data matters. So I would say three things. One, we are not the poor cousin. I mean, I spent a lot of time in this field, and for example, I don't call myself a not-for-profit. I don't say I'm not tall or I'm not white or I'm not a man. I refuse to describe what I do as a not. So let's think about the language we use to describe ourselves, number one, because you show up the way you want to be seen, okay? That's a bigger issue, and you and I have sort of chatted about that a little bit. Number two, data matters. This sector, I think, has gotten a lot stronger on the data, and that's great. It's great to have the data. What are you going to do with the data? You've got media, you've got government, you've got, so use that data in the same way that if a company wants to come to the government and say, if you want us to create this many jobs and you want us to put this much into the economy, here's what we need. Well, this is our moment, right? This is our moment where we say, if you want us to continue to do the work, and I know that this has been going on for years, but we're at this crucial point. That's number two. Number three, I would say, is I think one of the factors that really doesn't get played is this idea of innovation in our sector. Do you know how many things have come up that the sector has solved for? Like, truly solved for. Put that in the window. Now is the time to get aggressive in a nice way. Now is the time to sort of say, hey, as we're doing and speak the language of the government, so I'll just speak federally for a second, we talk about Canada Strong. Canada Strong, yes, it's trade. Canada Strong, yes, is a good healthcare system. Canada Strong means a strong community base where volunteers are upholding some places. So I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded kind of way is take up the space. You know, Megan, you're a secret weapon, right? You go in there, you're not shy. You go in and have meetings with whomever you want to meet with. They'll listen to you because you come prepared. The number of people on this call who have leverage, go talk to your MPP, go talk to your city councilor, go talk to your senator, go talk to your MP. Because what they don't know, they don't know. And I think it's really easy for people to ignore a sector that we don't always value. On the one hand, I think we value what we pay for. What we don't realize is we pay for this stuff. We do. We don't invest enough. That's the difference. Does that make sense to you?
I love that you are such a fierce champion for the ways in which we need to invest in the system, be loud, take up space, make our message super clear. And I so appreciate your leadership, especially this year, especially during National Volunteer Week. And your time and your availability and your true leadership on this is so appreciated and so valued. And I'm going to hand the floor over to my co-host, Gina Jordan, who's going to jump in and officially thank you. And I'm so appreciative of your presence and your leadership. So I'm going to hand it back to Gina as I sort of wrap my little personal thank you up in a bow. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you.
Awesome. Couldn't agree more. Just really, really appreciate the comments and glad we had the time with you today to share your stories and just obviously, like, I get that very passionate, heartfelt, engagement from you. It comes right through. So feels connected even though we're in different rooms. And so I really appreciate you, talking today about building that habit of volunteering from early on and those early memories and moments, and some of which I shared myself as a young child volunteering at a long-term care home, and appreciated your comments about teenagers and the focus on how we incite and incentivize the youth and remove the barriers to youth for volunteering. And as a parent of a high school teen who's been volunteering for 3 years, those comments about the opportunity for skill building and problem solving and career discovery and networking references. Those really, really resonate, I think, with many on the call today. And thinking about how we remember those who show up, who consistently show up for us in community at all levels. And your comments around this doesn't just happen. Look, it's a huge industry and it takes work. And it is about the collective. So appreciated your recognition of all of those today who make that collective possible, and many of whom we've got on the phone, and it's government, voluntary sector organizations, and funders, and the volunteer managers. I used to be one, so appreciate the call out for those unsung heroes, and the volunteers themselves that really work together to drive that economic impact. Yes, let's talk about that. And the social impact as well. And it really, everybody working together, that's what makes Canada strong. So appreciate your comments and your time today, and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you so much. And I really do apologize. I can't stay. I was really looking forward to hearing from our from Udlu and Priscilla. And so I know you're taping this, and I will make sure that I watch that part. And I just want to say thank you again. I'm really touched by the conversations I've had with volunteers, and I've got 20 years ahead of me. I don't think you can expect that I'll go anywhere too far. And I do really wish you all really well. And I do thank you. I thank you so much for everything that you do. And now I'm going to take my running shoes and run over to the Senate. So I appreciate very much the quick wrap up as well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much on behalf of Volunteer Canada and our network of partners, Senator Mohamed. We so appreciate you being here, and we will let you dash off to the Senate, and we will move on to warmly welcome Udlu and Priscilla. So thank you so much, Senator Mohamed. I have now the distinct pleasure of introducing our two speakers who are both 2024 recipients of the Canada Volunteer Awards and who have tremendous insights to share with us about volunteering and their unique contributions as Canadians. Firstly, and as Minister Hajdu mentioned, we're joined by panelist Udlu Hanson, who was born and raised in Iqaluit, Nunavut. Udlu is a proud Northerner and leader with deep roots in community. She is the co-founder and president of the Anauma Community Foundation, Nunavut's first community foundation, helping to strengthen local giving, community leadership, and long-term resilience across the territory. Udlu also brings a strong national perspective. She currently serves on the Governor General's Advisory Group on Reconciliation and has previously worked closely with Her Excellency Mary Simon, acting as Executive Director and Special Advisor when Ms. Simon was President of ITK, the national organization representing Inuit across Canada. Udlu's work bridges grassroots community building with national leadership, and she brings an essential Northern and Inuit perspective to conversations about reconciliation, civic participation, and community-led change. We're very, very pleased to have her with us today. I'm also very pleased to be able to introduce to you Priscilla Ojomu. It is my pleasure to introduce Priscilla as another one of the Canada Volunteer Award winners. Priscilla is the co-founder of the Canada Confesses Advocacy Institute, where she has mobilized more than 150 volunteers and engaged over 70,000 Canadians in conversations on social issues and equipped young leaders to pursue the Sustainable Development Goals. Currently, she is a Bachelor of Law student at the University of Leicester. Priscilla brings a strong commitment to justice, equity, and collective action. Shaped by her upbringing in a diverse community, she is a powerful champion for voices that too often go unheard. I am so very happy to welcome both Udlu and Priscilla to the stage today to join us in conversation as two of the Canada Volunteer Award winners. All right, so I have the unique honor of asking some questions and hearing the tremendous insights from these two phenomenal leaders. So both of you have focused your volunteering on a specific community. Can you elaborate on the challenges of these communities and how your volunteering has sought to address these issues? How have you been the spark in igniting volunteerism? And maybe I'll start with Udlu for this question.
Sure, thank you. My name is Udlu. I go by Udlu, make it easier for everybody else. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of today's important discussion. And thank you to Volunteer Canada and Minister Hajdu and Senator Farah Mohamed. How inspiring. Oh my goodness. Wow, that was incredible. I forgot that I was actually going to have to speak because I was just in awe. My jaw was on the table. Very honored to be here, and I just want to note that it's not lost on me that everyone on the panel are women. That I'm kind of riding the same high from yesterday. Excuse me. In Nunavut, we're trying to create a women in mining chapter. So met a number of incredible women in mining yesterday, and so this is a nice follow-up. To your question in terms of challenges and our specific communities that we've been serving. So I guess in my case, it would be the Inuit communities in Nunavut. And as was mentioned nationally, we have Inuit communities right across the Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Northern Quebec, and Northern Labrador. But I was born and raised here in Iqaluit, Nunavut, so that's where a lot of my work has been. And quite honestly, I was a little bit. I'm a little bit. When it comes to trying to focus on challenges, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me, and I maybe in Inuit fashion, I will try and stick to what we're doing to, what volunteers are trying to do to address them. Because it's no secret that Nunavut has the worst social indicators in Canada. The highest rates of poverty and unemployment and food security, lack of housing. I mean, see how quickly the conversation changes. And it's not one that we necessarily try and shy away from, but just I guess in this conversation, it's and in the work that we do, it really is about trying to make change and not to dwell on what is wrong, but to use strengths and what people bring to the table to want to change those social indicators. And I think in Nunavut, and it's right across the board. I say that for Nunavut, but as we know, in Indigenous communities, they're pretty much all the same, unfortunately. And so the volunteering efforts look a lot the same. What I would say in Nunavut that's a little bit different is that because we're still, the wage-based economy is so new to Nunavut. My mother was born in a tent. We're only a generation away from people who lived in igloos, and there was no wage. It was all people living off the land, and it was very community oriented. So I feel like we're lucky enough that we're still living that sense of community. It's a very, very strong sense of community. I don't know that people would consider themselves as volunteers when they're helping out. And that's what they're doing. They're helping out. They're not volunteers. And I guess that was another thing I was a little bit uncomfortable about was National Volunteer Award. You have to stop and think, volunteer? Okay, is that what I am? So the reference to volunteerism and what people do to try and address some of the challenges would, in terms of what looks different, are we're still trying to, because there was an era, and that, somewhat ugly era, where Inuit there were policies that were designed to try and have them not so Inuk when it comes to their culture, when it comes to language. There was language, there was just means and ways to try and, I guess, make people less Inuk. So a lot of community, and what we're moving towards now are a lot of community initiatives that try and bring back that pride, bring, cultural and language preservation programs, just trying to bring that sense of well-being, community well-being, but individual well-being. Maybe I'll just leave it there just because I don't want to take up too much time. In terms of Spark, that question, what about Spark? I feel like it's the volunteers that actually spark me, right? When I see how hard volunteers work and how hard people are working to have healthy communities, to have healthy families, I mean, that's what motivates me. I have absolutely no intention to spark others. It sounds strange, but it's true. I'm only feeding off their energy and what they want to do in order to see people thrive. So thank you.
I love those comments, Udlu. They're so insightful, and they reframe how we think about volunteers also, because it really focuses it much more on support for community and thinking about it through a different lens that's much more rooted in family and community and place. So I really, really appreciate those comments. And I feel hopeful listening to you, and I know I'll feel hopeful listening to Priscilla too. So Priscilla, what about you? How have you been the spark in igniting volunteerism?
Thank you, Megan. And I really love what Udlu said about they've been the spark instead. So just the community. And I think that resonates with my experience too as well. So to start with, I'm Nigerian. My family and I immigrated to Canada just about 2014, and I turned 13 here, and I was so excited. It was a bit unexpected, but I was ready to call Canada home, and I was so grateful for the new opportunities that came my way. And over the course, we moved around. We eventually settled in a small town in Alberta. And fast forward all the way to 2020, the pandemic. As we all know, a lot of things happened during that year, personally, around the world, around the globe. And for me, I think 2020 was the year that sparked my volunteering. As you know, Ulu mentioned, helping out is the core of all of this. And my family, especially my parents, were community leaders back home in Nigeria. So I saw just the spark that they brought to their community and how enriching that was. And that motivated me. But as a teenager, as we've sort of mentioned ahead, you can get easily distracted, and there's no other bigger distraction than a global pandemic, really. So I was seeking things to do to feel connected, especially since now we're going virtual. And there I found a diversity in skills youth training program, completely virtual. You got to connect with other youth around Canada, which was huge because, again, really small rural town. I did not have a lot of resources nearby, but through this program, I met someone else and we connected and we had to create a project. And that's how Canada Confesses came to be. It was just a small project. I did not intend it to grow further than it did, but I looked around me. So this is regarding the communities. To me, as a racialized person, I think it was just the more present issue. Around this time, there was a lot of global movement for justice, especially affecting Black and Indigenous peoples. And this I saw too around me. And I realized, while Canada is such, as we've said, we people do look to us for proof of concept in many ways. But within this part, I thought, there's a lot of change that could be made. There's a lot of issues that were going on, and our neighbor over there, the just how it works, was kind of overshadowing these issues. And I wanted to do something to talk about it with my peers, to talk about it with other students too as well, and hence came County Confesses. And so a lot of the challenges and issues we saw were just a lack of access to resources. I was experiencing this myself. A lot of rural Canadians do not have the same access to people who live in urban areas in so many different ways. And then just as well, a lack of connection. So I was a psychology student at the time, and Udlu mentioned the well-being aspect, and it just so resonated. There's a lot of mental health challenges, and with the theory of intersectionality, it just built upon each of these issues. They were also connected, and I thought we needed to do something to address this. So it started first with storytelling, because we realized the power of stories, the power of sharing stories, the power of being heard can really transform the experience of someone's lives. So it was really small. We started with a storytelling campaign called the Confessions Campaign, and then we started gathering resources. We wanted to build a resource database. So using the skills that we had as psychology students, so gathering resources was a huge component. And then slowly started to expand. So 2021, we launched and we decided to call for, I suppose, other volunteers. So to get mobilized. And I just called my two best friends, like, hey, I'm doing something in the community. Would you like to join? And they said yes. And it just started really small, really grassroots. We're talking to each other. And they were also around Canada. We had one in Newfoundland, one all the way in Ontario. I was in Alberta. It was so cool to see how people who had similar experiences, but from different communities, could gather in one place, the virtual internet, and create change gradually. And obviously, since then, so I started Can Confesses a few months after I turned 19. I'll be turning 26, 25, sorry. Forgot my age there. I'll be turning 25 this year, so it's been 6 years almost since then. And I cannot, just reflecting on all the experiences, it's been so profound, the level of change. And we realized we had to go for all levels, so personal, institutional, systemic, because you can't really, you have to target all of those. So we've been so fortunate to have conversations with MLAs, MPs, community organizers, people also working in the for-profit industry, all sectors. We realized we had to reach out and get their support and get their help, because these issues are really rooted deep, as we realized when we were looking at the theories of change and all of these models that we learned over the course of this journey. And for me, they really have sparked me. They've ignited, my love for volunteering and just helping out, because instead of resorting to apathy, I could resort to action. I believe as Minister Hajdu mentioned, turning fear into action. So the fear that we felt, especially as youth, in a really time of great uncertainty and violence, we thought we could transform that into action and hope, essentially. So it's just been a story of hope, and I'm so excited to continue that.
Well, thank you so much, Priscilla. I love your own personal recognition of how you moved from what could be apathy to action, and how it also helped you to grow professionally from the sounds of things and apply some of your knowledge and skills. I love that. Okay, we're going to dive into another round of questions here. I'm going to start with Priscilla this time. As the co-founder of Canada Confesses Advocacy Institute, you've rallied volunteers and you've sparked conversations about important social issues, all the while equipping young people to pursue the Sustainable Development Goals, while you were also a Bachelor of Law student. I think that sounds like a lot as I say it even. So for all the young people watching, how have you been able, these are like just practical, real skills here. How have you been able to balance being a student and a community leader? And what tips do you have for others who are trying to do the same thing?
Thank you. I love this question. It's one I do get quite often. Even just yesterday, I got asked about advice, and I'll start with the advice I gave. So it's quite simple, and I have it pinned here on my wall. The quote is, "You cannot do good if you're not doing well." And this is something that I took probably like 2 years ago. It was at a circle for youth change makers, and someone mentioned this, and it really resonated with me. So the first sort of practical tip I would give is to take care of yourself, to be in community, because you're not, like, I know we all want to change the world from a young age, but you can't do it alone. You need to do it with other people, and you really cannot do your best work if you're not at a good capacity to function. And then other tips that I've sort of used, just balancing law school and advocacy in general, is intentionality. So you do have to practice this with intention. You can't just hope, oh, it'll figure out. And trust me, I've learned that through my undergrad. I made all the mistakes there, and I realized, okay, you do have to be sort of strategic with this. So some things I do is planning. I plan my Google Calendar. When people have a peak, they get scared. But it really helps to visualize, because then you don't overcommit, because you can actually see what your schedule is. I block everything, including simple things as when I'm gonna have breakfast, when I'm gonna recharge. I love arts and theater, so I make sure each week I'm seeing something, whether it's the orchestra or the film, anything. Make sure I have something fun I'm doing each week, because and then you also get connected, because a lot of my hobbies tend to be things the elderly love. So I really love that, because then I get to connect with them too as well. And other strategies I would recommend is also just being realistic. So if you're in a position of leadership, delegate. So this is where community really comes in play. And as someone who sort of struggled with, but I can do this, like I want to do this, I love doing this. I realize delegating also gives an opportunity for because we work mostly with youth, other youth to also gain those skills themselves. And if you just take it all, they will never really have the opportunity to make the same mistakes and learn too as well. So it's actually, being selfless when you delegate sometimes. And then other skills I've learned is just so there's this phrase, progress, not perfection. And that is a huge game changer, because I quite struggle with perfectionism. And of course, because you want things to go well, you want to see the change, but realizing that baby steps, they really matter too as well. So just taking things as they go. And overall, I think another thing that helps me balance this, so the even the concept of balance, it would never be perfect, but you can make an intentional trade-off. So you think, what are you willing to sacrifice? What will absolutely not be sacrificed? So your health, your family, things you love, you cannot sacrifice those. But other things, there may be trade-offs once in a while, because sometimes, the work needs to get done. But overall, I think it's a way of knowing the why. So why are you doing this work? What is it that you hope to gain? And also alignment. So it's not distinct things like my law, studies and volunteering. They actually contribute to each other, because even within the law school, I do pro bono work. And that also helps me connect with the community for people facing various issues. And also realizing that this makes me a better law student, hopefully a better lawyer in the future, as well as it also makes me gain skills I can then apply to the other volunteering that I do. So it really connects and it feeds off of each other, but you won't be able to do the work until you actually have the time to recharge, talk to community if you're having struggles, and overall, if you're someone who's thinking of starting an initiative, is just to start small. So use what you have, talk to people just like I did. I found my friends, I found the network, I used the resources I had, and I tried to do something with that. And over the time, you will grow. it's just like that. You will grow, but you do have to start small and you have to take care of yourself, essentially.
Thank you. Those are very practical tips, not just for young people, but for everyone of all ages, basic taking care of yourself, start small, start start going versus perfection. So I love those insights, Priscilla. Thank you. Um, Udlu, your journey has taken you through political roles, advisory groups, and co-founding Nunavut's first community foundation. What does it mean for you to bring your voice to so many different tables, and how do you sustain yourself while you're doing it?
Thank you. Yeah, using a lot of what Priscilla had to say, I suppose. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to have been able to be kind of around the board table in different roles in government and Inuit organizations and nonprofit organizations. So I've been very fortunate. I think what's I continue to be at different tables because of my volunteering, because of the work that I do outside of my work. And I think bringing my voice to those different tables, I feel like anyways, I'm not in the trenches when it comes to volunteering. I'm not out getting my hands dirty per se. But what I can do, and I think because I've been around those tables, is I can provide some perspective and support around governance, um, capacity building, fundraising, and you know, creating. When I'm sitting at those tables, I also feel as though I have the ability to create some space for the other organizations that I happen to represent, because I never feel like I'm just wearing one hat when I'm at the table. It always kind of spills into work that I'm doing after 5 o'clock or on the weekends or what have you. So it's just really hoping to be able to create that space where organizations or community organizations, initiatives don't normally have people's ear or aren't typically represented at those tables. So I feel, it's upon me to ensure that when I sit at that table that I am representing those voices. And also I'm providing context because again, if they're not at the table, then how do people understand, their essence or what they're trying to do or provide or what their purpose is. So uh, and that, I guess being Inuk and being in non-Inuit environments in the South and what have you has uh, given me that experience that I could bring. I can understand when there's context required, or I can see when there's some understanding that needs to be provided, in a different way. And one last thing I'll just say is again, in the Inuit, non-Inuit kind of worlds, and now my community foundation was really, created in order to create a bridge from Southern Canada to the North, because we knew there were so many Southern Canadians that want to help. And we didn't really have that charitable mechanism for them to do so. And so this community foundation, being the first and only in Nunavut, has provided that bridge. And it's been an amazing experience because we love nothing more to talk about our favorite subject, the North, Inuit, when we're in the South. So we're able to do that. And having worked and around the table in different positions has afforded me with a lot of different kinds of networks that Northerners, Nunavummiut people in Nunavut wouldn't necessarily have. So it's really helped to kind of bring the South, especially the charitable side of things, north, if I may, and vice versa. We've held a couple lunches and gatherings in the South to bring the community initiatives, their purpose and what they're trying to do in the North to the South, for people to understand what it is that they would actually be supporting if they were able to and if they could. So yeah, I think I've all the different experience has been able to provide that space and context and networking.
Both of you have spoken so beautifully about how you've built bridges, how you've really turned into action at times when it's been most needed to support your communities. I'm gonna just dive right into some questions from the audience, if that's okay, because we have some really interesting ones that I'm gonna ask. So I'm gonna start with you, Udlu. And so for Udlu, I appreciate your comments about the challenges of focusing on deficits and how that can be a limiting frame. What do you see as key community assets that can be leveraged to support community participation?
Great question. I mean, where do I start? I always say that in Nunavut, our greatest asset, our greatest resources are our people, our Inuit. Um, because I truly believe that we're so rich in culture and in language and a true connection to the land still. Inuit's mainstay diet is still country food. And so our connection to nature, the environment, family, communities. So all of these things that are peripheral become very rooted in in us individually. So that's what we bring to the table. That's what we're able to um, to demonstrate in things that we do and how we problem solve, how we make decisions, how I know a lot of Southerners and other jurisdictions may think sometimes that we do things a little, differently, which we do. But because things take time, things aren't really done on the fly here. We really, because we do need to go back to talk to people and our elders and go back to making sure that things are really deeply rooted. So it's definitely a different way of thinking that I think that, as we call it, the Inuit worldview. That is what Inuit bring to the table, and as I believe the one of our greatest assets.
Awesome. Thank you, Ulu. And Priscilla, another question for you is, what advice would you give adults to support young people to get interested or engaged in volunteerism? And if you think a little bit about your own experience, what advice might you give adults to support young people to get involved?
Okay, absolutely. So I would like to start with what was discussed at first, which is just incentivizing youth. So for me, the uh what ignited me, so I suppose my incentive was just the environment around me and a desire to grow. But as I've worked with other high school volunteers and there is a strive for getting those skills for employment, to just grow and maximize your potential as much as possible. And oftentimes that distracts them because they don't see the potential then in volunteering. So incentives can be as small as what was discussed with the parking. It could also be shadowing opportunities. So we've mentioned career discovery is such a huge one. So I've benefited a lot from mentoring. So mentoring from not even just someone who is in my field, but also just other fields, because then you get to learn a little bit about each area and discover, oh, maybe I do not want to do this. So mentorship opportunities are really, really significant because you're learning just directly and someone is taking their time out of their day. And that could even be like a coffee chat, for example, or it could be more of a long-term informal type of mentorship opportunity. So that's really important. Another thing I've also seen is just believing in you to letting them make mistakes because you will make mistakes. And just, being able to work alongside because I know it's not the easiest. Sometimes it's easiest to just get the work done yourself, but it does come with that learning because if we're to have, that intergenerational transfer of knowledge, there will be those hiccups and you may get a bit frustrated, like, oh, it's taking a long time, but they will get there. They will learn and absorb that information. So it's just, having that direct connection and being able to guide them through all of the messy bits so that way they can, shine and do their best work.
I love those. That's such concrete, good advice from really both of you. based on the questions from the audience. And there's one last one that I'm going to ask you. That's a very short question, but you have both been so optimistic and created such hope in myself listening to you. So I want to say a personal thank you to both of you on that note. But I just would love to, this is from one of our audience members who would love to ask both of you, if you could sum up your hope for Canada's future in one word, what would it be? So maybe I will go, I'm going to ask you, Priscilla. So how would you sum up your hope for Canada's future in one word? What would it be?
This is difficult, but I would choose healing. Yeah, I would choose healing. Because just the name itself implies there's growth, there's restoration, and there's just a lot to heal from. So community level, personal level, and if we're to see all of the, things we hope for example, the SDG goals, a lot of the issues that we've mentioned here, it starts with healing. A lot of things have to be healed. There needs to be connection, and there just needs to be a time for a pause, and we realize what really matters to us. And I would love to see that. I would love to see Canada that has healed from a lot of issues.
Awesome. Thank you, Priscilla. And Udlu, over to you for the last comment, the one word around Canada's future.
Great question. Really hard question, I might add. But the first thing that jumped in my mind was culture, because it could be applied in so many different ways. Everybody has a culture. Everybody, even just family units, there's cultural ties and family units. Communities have culture. Businesses have culture. Canada is known for being a multicultural country and being unapologetically, and that's what we love about Canada. I do anyways, that we accept, acknowledge, cherish, and we're richer because of it, because of all the different cultures. And when I was talking earlier about the different programs that we have, there's a real understanding and recognition that without embracing and acknowledging and cherishing, honoring your culture, you're not going to be healthy. You're not going to thrive. You really do need to be culturally based and rooted in whatever culture that may be, and many different cultures in a day that you would be a part of. So that'd be my hope for Canada, is that we continue to embrace all of our different cultures and one as a national culture as well.
Thank you so much, Udlu and Priscilla. Both of you are such inspirational guests today, shining a light on what can be done when you turn to action that's rooted in culture and community and purpose. Such great shining examples of Canada Volunteer Award winners. And so we're rounding the corner to the end of our conversation to celebrate and thank Canada's 24 million volunteers. I'm going to hand it over to Gina for some closing remarks before we wrap up today's celebration. Over to you, Gina.
Awesome. Just wow, what an amazing, hopeful, insightful discussion today. I'm actually not ready for it to end, but I will say, I will invite you to check out the link to a new video on iv26.ca. We'll pop the link in the chat. That celebrates just some of the 365 stories that we're sharing this year on volunteering, and would just invite all of you to come and share your own stories of volunteering like we've heard today. And as we close out this celebration of National Volunteer Week, I want to begin with sincere thanks for Minister Hajdu for joining us today, for sharing her stories and her work to support the critical infrastructure of volunteering, to Senator Farah Mohamed for her powerful reflections and her continued advocacy for community leadership and civic participation, and to our panelists, Canada's Volunteer Awards recipients. I am so inspired and hopeful from the conversation that we just shared and witnessed here. And Udlu, thank you for sharing your perspective, reminding us the importance of support for culture and connection and community, and thinking about how we all gain from volunteering. I appreciated you framing volunteering as helping out. That is, in fact, how many people across the country see volunteering as just helping out. And speaking about your experiences as well as a board member, and governance and capacity building and fundraising. And those board level experiences really, truly help set that foundation for organizations, open doors, represent voices, build understanding. So critically important. And Priscilla, wow. thank you. Thank you for your courage, your energy, your leadership, for showing up and showing us what's possible when young people are empowered to lead change. When you see that opportunity for hope and you just dive in, schedule it, and work to change those systems. Your comments on just those critical impacts of connection, I think really, really important, and thinking about how we can grow through volunteering, especially when you know your why. I also want to thank Dr. Megan Conway and the entire Volunteer Canada team for bringing this celebration and the work that Volunteer Canada staff do every day to support volunteers and organizations and those that rely upon them across the country. But mostly, I want to thank those millions of volunteers across this country who just show up quietly without fanfare from coast to coast to coast, strengthening community, caring for others, responding when help is needed the most. And whether it's delivering meals, mentoring youth, supporting seniors, welcoming newcomers, coaching teams, protecting the environment, building connection, those large and small ways all matter. And volunteering is how we're turning that care into action, how values become visible. And as we mark National Volunteer Week and the International Year of the Volunteer, we want to recommit to ensuring that volunteering remains accessible. We heard about that today, inclusive and supported across the country. So to every volunteer listening today, thank you for your time, for your generosity, and for your commitment to others who truly do make Canada stronger, one act of service at a time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for celebrating with us today. Thank you to Canada's 24 million volunteers. As Gina mentioned, we so appreciate all of you. As we conclude, take a minute to visit ivy26.ca for more ways to engage in the campaign throughout the course of the year. And if you have any further questions, email us at ivy26@volunteer.ca. Thank you so much for celebrating with us. Happy National Volunteer Week and enjoy the rest of your day.